What would you do if I told you that one of the fastest-growing fried chicken brands in America didn't start with celebrity investors, a $1 million loan, or decades of restaurant experience, but with just $1,000 and a guy who had no business building a food empire? Today, Ethan Walker is known by some customers as the new fried chicken king. His company serves thousands of customers every week, employs dozens of people, and generates millions in annual sales. But the numbers are only part of the story. The real question is how someone with almost no capital entered one of the most competitive industries in America and managed to stand out in a market already dominated by giants. Every year, thousands of restaurants open across the country. Most never survive long enough to celebrate a second anniversary. Rising food costs, labor shortages, expensive rent, and fierce competition eliminate businesses every single day. Yet somehow, Ethan found a way to grow while many others disappeared. And what makes this story even more surprising is where it began. Not in a busy commercial kitchen. Not inside a famous restaurant group. Not with a secret family recipe passed down for generations. It started with a simple belief that customers wanted something better than what most chains were offering. A better experience. Better consistency. Better value. Looking at the business today, it's easy to assume success was inevitable. The packed dining rooms, the growing team, the steady stream of orders, and the expanding brand make it look like everything went according to plan. But behind those numbers was a series of risky decisions, unexpected setbacks, and one critical advantage that almost nobody noticed at the time. Because the truth is, Ethan didn't become the fried chicken king because he made great chicken. He became successful because he built a system that turned a small opportunity into a scalable business. And that system began with a decision that almost everyone around him thought was a mistake. What makes Ethan's story so unusual is that almost every signal pointed in the wrong direction. He was not a trained chef. He had never managed a restaurant. He did not come from a family that owned food businesses. And unlike many entrepreneurs who raise large amounts of money before opening their doors, he barely had enough capital to get started. At the time, friends and family were not necessarily against his idea, but few people believed it could become anything significant. From the outside, the numbers simply did not make sense. The restaurant industry was already crowded with national chains, local favorites, and experienced operators who had spent years building loyal customer bases. Entering that market with limited resources looked more like a gamble than a business plan. Before launching the company, Ethan worked a series of ordinary jobs and spent countless hours studying businesses that seemed to grow faster than everyone else. He noticed something interesting. The companies creating the strongest customer loyalty were rarely competing on price alone. They understood exactly why customers came back. Some focused on speed. Others focused on consistency. The best ones made customers feel confident that they would get the same experience every single time. That observation changed the way he thought about business. Instead of asking how to make the best fried chicken, he started asking a different question. Why do customers choose one restaurant over another when both sell similar food? The more he researched, the more he realized that most small restaurants were obsessed with recipes while ignoring systems. They spent years perfecting flavors but struggled to deliver the same quality, service, and experience every day. Ethan believed there was an opportunity hidden inside that gap. If he could create a business that delivered reliability at a level customers could trust, he might be able to compete against companies much larger than his own. It sounded simple in theory. The problem was that he still had almost no money, no established brand, and no guarantee that anyone would care. Yet despite every reason to play it safe, he decided to move forward. Looking back, that decision would become the foundation of everything that happened next. Because his biggest advantage was not experience, capital, or connections. It was seeing the business differently than almost everyone else around him. The breakthrough came when Ethan stopped thinking like a restaurant owner and started thinking like a customer. Most operators in the industry were fighting the same battle. They competed on menu size, discounts, limited time offers, and endless promotions. Every business seemed to be trying to attract attention by doing more. Ethan believed the real opportunity was doing less, but doing it exceptionally well. Instead of building a menu with dozens of options, he focused on a small number of products that could be executed consistently. Every item had a purpose. Every ingredient had a reason for being there. The goal was not to give customers more choices. The goal was to make every choice a good one. That approach simplified operations, reduced waste, and made training employees easier. But the menu was only part of the strategy. Ethan became obsessed with understanding customer behavior. He spent hours watching how people ordered, how long they waited, what they complimented, and what they complained about. Small details started revealing larger patterns. Customers valued speed more than he expected. They noticed cleanliness more than decoration. They remembered friendly service longer than advertising. Most importantly, they returned when they felt confident they would receive the same experience every visit. That insight became the foundation of the business. While competitors focused on food alone, Ethan focused on repeatability. Every process was documented. Every task had a system. Every employee followed the same standards. From food preparation to customer interaction, consistency became the company's competitive advantage. It was not the kind of strategy that generated headlines. Nobody walks into a restaurant because they heard the owner has a great operations manual. But customers absolutely notice when a business runs smoothly. They notice when orders are accurate. They notice when food quality stays consistent. They notice when service feels reliable. Over time, those small advantages compound into something much larger. Looking back, this was the hidden edge that separated Ethan from countless other entrepreneurs entering the same market. He was never trying to create the most complicated restaurant. He was trying to create the easiest restaurant to scale. And while that philosophy sounded simple, putting it into practice required solving a much bigger challenge. Because having a system means nothing if nobody walks through the door. The next obstacle was finding the first customers willing to give an unknown brand a chance. The first challenge was simple but brutal. Nobody knew who Ethan was. Customers were not searching for his restaurant. They were not waiting for a new brand to open. They already had plenty of places to buy lunch and dinner. If the business was going to survive, he needed to earn attention before he could earn loyalty. With a limited budget, traditional advertising was not an option. Large marketing campaigns, television commercials, and expensive promotions were completely out of reach. Instead, Ethan focused on something every small business can control. He concentrated on creating experiences people would talk about. In the beginning, every customer mattered. A single positive review could lead to several new customers. A single disappointed customer could damage momentum before it even started. That reality forced the team to operate with an unusual level of discipline from day one. Orders had to be accurate. Service had to be friendly. The restaurant had to feel clean, organized, and welcoming. Ethan understood that word of mouth is not luck. It is usually the result of delivering an experience people feel compelled to share. During the first few months, growth was slow but measurable. A handful of customers became regulars. Those regulars brought friends. Families returned. Online reviews began to accumulate. More importantly, patterns started emerging in the data. Certain menu items consistently outperformed others. Certain promotions generated traffic while others barely moved the needle. Instead of relying on assumptions, Ethan tracked everything he could. He paid attention to customer feedback, average ticket sizes, repeat visits, and purchasing behavior. The numbers revealed something interesting. The customers who came back most often were not necessarily attracted by discounts. They returned because they trusted the experience. That reinforced the philosophy he had built the business around from the beginning. Reliability was becoming more valuable than promotions. As customer traffic increased, the systems he developed earlier started producing results. Employees could be trained faster. Operations remained consistent during busy periods. Service quality remained stable even as order volume increased. What started as a small experiment was beginning to look like a real business. The restaurant was no longer fighting for survival one customer at a time. Momentum was building. But while customer growth was encouraging, Ethan knew that revenue alone does not create a successful company. The real test would come when he opened the financials and discovered whether the business was actually generating meaningful profit. For many restaurant owners, revenue can be deceptive. A busy dining room creates the appearance of success, but appearances do not pay bills. Ethan understood that if the business was going to become something significant, every dollar flowing through the company needed a purpose. As customer traffic increased, he became increasingly focused on understanding exactly where the money was being made and where it was being lost. One of the biggest advantages of maintaining a streamlined menu was cost control. Fewer ingredients meant less waste, simpler inventory management, and more predictable purchasing. Instead of carrying dozens of products that moved at different speeds, the business concentrated on a core group of high-performing items. This allowed Ethan to negotiate better pricing with suppliers while maintaining consistency across operations. The numbers began to reveal the power of the model. A typical customer might spend between $12 and $18 per visit. At first glance, that may not sound extraordinary. But multiplied across hundreds of customers per day, the results became meaningful very quickly. On strong days, revenue could reach several $1,000s. Across an entire month, those daily transactions accumulated into numbers that few people would associate with a relatively simple food business. Labor was another area where systems created financial advantages. Because processes were standardized, employees could become productive faster. Training costs stayed manageable, mistakes were reduced, and service quality remained stable. Every improvement increased operational efficiency. Every minute saved during preparation or service translated into greater profitability over time. Rent, utilities, packaging, ingredients, payroll, and marketing all had to be carefully managed. Ethan reviewed financial data constantly. He wanted to understand which products generated the highest margins, which hours produced the strongest sales, and which investments created the greatest return. The goal was never to maximize revenue at any cost. The goal was to build a business capable of producing sustainable profit. Over time, that discipline started paying off. The restaurant was no longer simply generating sales. It was generating cash flow. The kind of cash flow that allowed Ethan to reinvest in equipment, strengthen operations, and prepare for future expansion. While many competitors were focused on attracting more customers, he was focused on building a machine that became stronger with every customer it served. And as the financial foundation improved, another opportunity emerged. The business was no longer limited by demand. It was becoming limited by capacity. For the first time, Ethan had to seriously consider how to grow beyond a single successful location. As revenue grew, most people assumed the secret was the food. Customers loved the menu, reviews continued to improve, and sales kept moving in the right direction. But inside the company, Ethan knew something important. The food attracted customers once. The system brought them back repeatedly. This was the part of the business most people never saw. Behind every order was a process designed to remove uncertainty. New employees followed detailed training procedures. Kitchen stations were organized to reduce unnecessary movement. Preparation methods were standardized so that quality remained consistent whether the restaurant was serving 50 customers or 500. Ethan believed that complexity was the enemy of scale. Every unnecessary step created opportunities for mistakes. Every unclear instruction increased the chances of inconsistency. So instead of adding layers of complexity as the business grew, he focused on simplification. If a process could be documented, it was documented. If a task could be standardized, it was standardized. The result was a business that became easier to manage as it expanded rather than harder. Hiring also evolved into a system. Instead of searching for perfect employees, Ethan looked for people who could thrive within a clear structure. Skills could be taught. Attitude and reliability were far more valuable. New team members quickly understood expectations because the company had already defined them. This reduced confusion and allowed managers to spend more time improving operations rather than solving the same problems repeatedly. Supply chain management became another critical piece of the puzzle. Consistent ingredient quality, reliable vendor relationships, and predictable inventory systems helped protect profit margins while supporting growth. Ethan treated operational discipline as a competitive advantage. While competitors often reacted to problems after they appeared, he tried to build systems that prevented problems from appearing in the first place. Over time, this created a powerful effect. The restaurant was no longer dependent on Ethan personally overseeing every detail. The business could function successfully even when he was not physically present. That freedom allowed him to focus on higher-level decisions, strategic planning, and future opportunities. What began as a small operation was gradually transforming into an organization capable of growth beyond a single location. Yet success created a new challenge. Expanding a business sounds exciting, but growth can destroy companies just as easily as it can strengthen them. The question was no longer whether the model worked. The question was whether the model could be replicated without sacrificing the quality and consistency that made customers trust the brand in the first place. By this point, the business had proven it could attract customers, generate profit, and operate consistently. The next objective was growth. But Ethan understood that expansion is where many successful businesses begin to fail. A profitable location does not automatically become a profitable chain. New locations introduce new managers, new employees, different customer demographics, and operational challenges that do not exist when everything is concentrated under one roof. Instead of rushing into expansion, Ethan approached growth the same way he approached every other part of the business. He built a system first. Before opening additional locations, he studied which elements of the operation absolutely had to remain consistent. Food quality could not change. Customer experience could not change. Training standards could not change. The goal was not to duplicate a restaurant. The goal was to duplicate a reliable experience. That distinction shaped every decision moving forward. Location selection became a strategic process rather than an emotional one. Ethan looked at traffic patterns, population density, household income levels, and competitive landscapes. He wanted markets where demand already existed rather than locations that would require expensive marketing campaigns to create awareness. Every potential site was evaluated through numbers, not assumptions. At the same time, leadership development became a major priority. A growing business cannot depend entirely on its founder. Ethan invested heavily in creating managers who understood the company's culture, systems, and expectations. Strong operators became just as important as strong locations. The better the team became, the easier it was to expand without sacrificing quality. As new locations opened, revenue accelerated. More customers meant larger purchasing power with suppliers. Greater purchasing power improved margins. Better margins created additional capital for future growth. Each successful location strengthened the entire organization. What made the strategy particularly effective was that expansion never felt chaotic. Customers visiting different locations received the same experience. Employees understood exactly what was expected of them. Managers followed the same operating framework. The systems developed during the early stages were now producing leverage on a much larger scale. Looking from the outside, the growth appeared rapid. But internally, it was the result of years spent refining processes that most customers would never notice. The company was becoming larger, stronger, and more valuable with each new location. Yet despite all the success, Ethan would later admit that one of his most important lessons came from a mistake that cost far more than money. It exposed a weakness in the business that nearly slowed everything down. One of the biggest misconceptions about successful entrepreneurs is that they avoid mistakes. In reality, growth often creates new problems faster than experience can solve them. For Ethan, one of the most expensive lessons came during a period when the company was expanding rapidly and everything appeared to be moving in the right direction. Revenue was increasing. New locations were performing well. Customer demand remained strong. From the outside, it looked like the business had figured everything out. But internally, cracks were beginning to appear. The mistake was not related to food quality, marketing, or competition. It was people. As the company grew, Ethan realized that hiring quickly and hiring correctly were not the same thing. During periods of rapid expansion, the pressure to fill positions can become overwhelming. Empty roles create operational stress, and operational stress can lead to rushed decisions. In several cases, team members who looked qualified on paper turned out to be poor fits for the company culture. The impact was larger than expected. One weak hire could affect morale, customer experience, training consistency, and management effectiveness. The problem was not simply the cost of replacing employees. The real cost came from distraction. Leadership attention shifted away from growth and toward solving preventable problems. That experience forced Ethan to rethink how the company approached recruitment. Instead of focusing primarily on skills, the hiring process began prioritizing values, reliability, accountability, and alignment with company standards. Technical abilities could be taught. Character was much harder to develop. Another lesson involved growth itself. There were moments when opportunities appeared attractive on the surface but did not align with the long-term vision of the business. Earlier in his journey, Ethan might have pursued every opportunity available. Experience taught him that saying no is often as important as saying yes. Not every revenue opportunity creates value. Not every expansion opportunity strengthens the company. Discipline became a competitive advantage. Looking back, Ethan believes these mistakes were necessary because they exposed weaknesses before those weaknesses became much larger problems. Every challenge forced the organization to improve systems, strengthen leadership, and clarify expectations. Ironically, some of the company's strongest operating procedures exist today because something went wrong in the past. The business emerged stronger after each setback. And perhaps the most interesting question of all is this. If Ethan lost everything tomorrow and had to start over from scratch, what would he actually do differently knowing everything he knows today? When Ethan reflects on the journey, the lesson is surprisingly simple. The business was never built on a secret recipe, a lucky break, or perfect timing. It was built on a series of repeatable decisions that compounded over time. Looking at the company today, people often focus on the revenue, the locations, the employees, and the growth. But those outcomes came much later. The foundation was established long before the business became successful. If everything disappeared tomorrow and Ethan had to start over with no locations, no team, and no brand recognition, he believes he would focus on the exact same principles. First, he would find a product that customers already want rather than trying to convince people to want something new. Second, he would create systems before growth. Most entrepreneurs try to grow first and organize later. Ethan learned that scaling chaos only creates bigger chaos. Third, he would become obsessed with customer experience. Not because it sounds good in a business book, but because customer trust is one of the few advantages that competitors cannot easily copy. Most importantly, he would start small and move quickly. One of the biggest misconceptions in entrepreneurship is that success requires massive capital. His experience taught him the opposite. Limited resources can actually force better decision-making. When every dollar matters, waste becomes visible. When every customer matters, service improves. When every hire matters, culture becomes stronger. The discipline developed during the early stages often becomes the reason a company succeeds later. That is why the most valuable asset Ethan built was never the restaurant itself. It was the knowledge gained from building it. The ability to identify opportunities, create systems, solve problems, and lead people can be applied again and again. Those skills are transferable across industries, markets, and business models. In many ways, the company became proof of a larger idea. Extraordinary results do not always come from extraordinary circumstances. Sometimes they come from ordinary people making consistently better decisions than everyone around them. And perhaps that is the real takeaway from Ethan's story. The business grew because he focused less on chasing success and more on building a system capable of producing it. Once the system worked, the results eventually followed.